Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 83 of Breaking Step. Are you sure you're okay? Maz asked Jackal as the fighter stood and stretched, wincing in the process. I'm fine. Jackal replied in that tone he used when being asked a question was what annoyed him instead of having to give the answer. Tibs healed me. The archer looked at him. His body's healing. Tibs corrected. There isn't much that can be done about his mind, Don added. He was slower in standing, even if there had been less damage. It was still more than the sorcerer had ever in. Yeah, that's actually not true. That is actually not true. I need to fix this. Because Dawn has been injured way more than this once. All right. Okay. I am going to have to go back in book 2 to verify the specifics, but I think that works. The only time the sorcerer had been more injured as far as Tibbs knew, was when he'd been tortured. And this time he hadn't complained, or even demanded Tibbs to heal him as soon as Jackal was able to talk. Ha, ha, Jekyll said. Okay, but how wise is it to continue with Tibbs nearly out of essence and all our items drained? Tibbs asked. He looked up. The sun was a handspan past the zenith. Actually, considering this doesn't match outside, shouldn't we turn around? It's what, the middle of the afternoon now? It's going to take us a while to make it back to the floor's entrance. Jekyll looked up, then at Tibbs. How sure are you that moves at the same speed as outside? Tibbs shrugged. It wasn't like he could ask Stowe, but he had no reason to trick them that way. Jekyll wasn't happy, but it was the best Tibbs could offer until he knew the reasons behind Stowe's silence. All right, but we're going by a different route, and we're checking all the buildings for loot. And for guard dogs? Don whispered. He grinned at Jackal's shudder. You are not funny. He kinda is. Mez grinned at the glare leveled on him. I, Jekyll kicked the dog, sending it back through the door. His punch crushed the back of the dog, biting his other leg. Not! He grabbed the one that had jumped on his back. Afraid! He threw it at the wall, where it left a crack and crumbled away as it slid to the ground. The fighter looked around, eyes wide and panting. I'm convinced. Mez said. You could have helped. You seem to be enjoying yourself, Don replied. My bow's still pretty much drained, Mez said. I figure it's best to keep it for real danger. Jekyll looked at Tibs. You barged in without letting me check for traps. You deserved what happened. The dogs had been laying in wait inside to throw themselves at whoever opened the door, and Jekyll hadn't even waited for Tibs to tell him what he'd sensed. There haven't been any traps in any of the other buildings, Jekyll replied, exasperated. Until now, Comdar said, and didn't react to the fighter's glare. And hopefully, Don said, now that you've bitten them without help, you won't be as scared of them. I'm not scared of them. They're dungeon creatures. Mez and Don exchanged a look, then grinned. Tibs left the others to their ribbing and entered the building. Another home. On the left was a fire pit with stone chairs and a low table on one side of it. On the table was a plate with 2 pastries and 1 cookie. They were filled with essence. The pastry felt the same, while the cookie had a different mix. He took the wrapped pastries. He took the wrapped pastries he'd taken from the other houses and set them next to these. Unwrapping them, they were different kinds. They both in how they looked and how the essence in them felt. There was a way of working out what they did. There would be a pattern to know how they were made. There would be a pattern to how they were made that told them that. Possibly the nuts and fruits would match the boost they gave. But for now, the only way he had to test them was to let Jekyll eat one and watch the result. His friends was not in the state to deal with Tibs being wrong right now. But for now, at the moment, he wrapped them up. The guild would take them, he expected, but hopefully they'd let them know what they did before the next run. A door opened to a sleeping room. The other one was like Zachariah's art room. He didn't know a lot of people who had lived. He didn't know if the people who lived here were here had all done art, but such rooms were common. Some, like this one, had easels, brushes, and bowled with dried colors. Others had chisels and stones, partially cut and nut. What none of them had was a wardrobe with intricate patterns woven on it. So it would be a chest. Or maybe it was just something that wasn't common in these rooms. It was, okay. Yeah, do I need this? Yeah. I don't need that. It was stone, like everything else, and the essence through it was what he'd expect. It didn't feel like the chest did. He opened it, and the only thing there was a sword resting against the back. Possibly this had been left by the occupant, who had been a fighter. The weave could account for it not rusting away. It was half Tibbs's height. The blade was thick, and metal was the main part of the weave. Magic, he told Jekyll. Magic, he told Jekyll on exiting the building, and they tied it to Mez's pack. You can check the next building, the fighter said. Tibs, Don said, pointing to a large building visible above the roof. What can you tell from it? It's like the rest, the essence, I mean. It was 4 stories tall, the tallest building they'd come across at this point. Some, deeper in the city, were taller, since they could see them over the roofs from where they stood. But the permit building had been the tallest one before this. We're checking it out, Don said, heading in that direction. I'm the one who says that, Jekyll called after the sorcerer. No, Miss said, following Don. You say, get me all the loot. The road bifurcated in front of the building, an arch, so that Tibbs expected they reconnected on the other side. It was about half the width of the permit building, but deeper than wide. The walls had columns supporting outcropping from the other floors. Tibbs has stated it is made the same as the other buildings, Kamdar said. Does that not mean it cannot be a dungeon room? Even if it is, Mez said, we don't have the time to deal with it. He motioned to the sun, which was approaching the midpoint between zenith and the horizon. What's got you so excited? Jekyll asked Don, who was walking around it, gazing in a mix of awe and disbelief. I've seen it before. The sorcerer grinned. How? Jekyll asked. A book, Tibbs replied. No, a part of the library the part of the library that holds the ancient texts looks exactly like this. How is that possible? Miss asked, looking first at Tibbs, then Cumdar. I do not know, the cleric said. This is Don's expertise, not mine. I have no idea how it's possible, the sorcerer said excitedly. How do dungeons know what they know? How do they, however they do, that is the repository. Yeah, maybe the dungeon knows what the people it ate knows, Jekyll said. Has there been anyone from your city among the new runners? Don laughed. How would I know? He faced them. You don't understand. I wasn't allowed in the repository, and it was filled with books, and it's right here. He grinned. Imagine what we can find in it. Traps, Tibbs said. Dungeon creatures, Mez added. Books, Jekyll said with a shudder. Ah. There's a line missing. I have no idea what I initially wanted there, but there's a line missing there. Okay, Jekyll began, and Dunn rushed for the door. Dunn, stop! But he motioned excitedly to the large double doors. Let me finish. We don't have a lot of time left. We don't have a lot of essence left. Those aren't good things to have when planning on exploring something that large. How are we dealing with whatever creatures the dungeon put in there? The traps. This is the kind of thing we want to be rested for, to start on early. I just want to take a peek. Don sounded almost like he was pleading. It's going to be here on the next run, Tibbs said, and with full reserves, as said, we'll be able to deal with anything there. Don looked at the door, then straightened. We come here directly. Jekyll nodded. We deal with this, then go back to looking for the boss room. It could be in there. It could be in here, Mez said. Jekyll scoffed. Don says it's filled with books. There's no way the floor boss is going to be among that. The sole aspect which supports your statement, Kamdar says, is that the building is somewhat close to the entrance, which would make for a perfect place for the boss. Don said, every runner is going to dismiss it because we all know the boss room would never be so close to the entrance. We'll find out during the next run, Jekyll said. Right now, I want to leave because I'm getting hungry and Tibbs won't let me have any of the pastries. The pastries I know he's hoarding. I'm keeping them so the guild will take them, Tibbs replied. Just one, Jekyll pleaded. I'm sure it won't do anything bad. Tibbs rolled his eyes. Then we should ignore all the buildings on the way so you can get to eat sooner. I'm not that hungry, the fighter replied. Jekyll slashed angrily at the gray-skinned person golem as he backed up the stairs. It took the blow on its shield, and Tibbs nearly tripped, the heel of his boot catching on the next step, and the sword pierced his side. How could he have been so careless after the constant chastising of Jekyll not being careful? He slashed, but the golem's colorful clothing cut his blade, and instead of cutting through, he unbalanced it. The stairs were the only paces away when the stairs were only paces away. Then it would be a quick trek to the inn and Russell's excellent cooking. The day had made him hungry too, and he figured they were done. This close, what could Stowe throw at them? Golem people, that was what. They'd scattered as soon as Tibbs yelled about the doorway forming, but the golems were already falling. and Jekyll, being Jekyll, had thrown himself at them without consideration for how low his reserves was, and how low his reserve was. His skin hadn't turned quite as gray as usual, and hadn't stopped the sword as it usually did. They had extricated him, but Don and Mez were carrying him up the stairs, while Tibs and Cumdar dealt with the remaining golem people while trying to keep up with the others. Jekyll wasn't dying, but he had to be in pain, and Tibs was too busy to help. Tibs parried and ducked under the staff coming at him from behind. Cumdar's staffs impacted the golem's shield and spilled darkness over and onto the arm. It didn't react, but Tibs sensed the darkness weakening the essence it came in contact with. The shield cut his sword, but it cut through it and the arm. Then Tibs angled himself to deal with another of the golem people, trusting Cumdar with this one. "We're at the doorway," Don yelled. Tibs glanced up to judge a distance and cursed as the impact against his poorly angled shield staggered him. "We will need to run," Cumdar said. "We turn our back on them and they'll cut them. Do you have enough essence to keep their swords from opening yours?" He tried to think of some way to get distance. He'd eyed the step already, but only for the golem not to slide down. They were too heavy for how much air he could send at them right now, same with earth or fire. I am disappointed to state that darkness does not make for an effective shield against weapon such as sword. "Tibs!" Mez yelled. "Protect Cumdar!" At the top of the steps, he sensed the fire essence forming into an arrow. Did Mez have enough left? "Behind me," he told the cleric, and Cumdar moved. Tibs slashed to keep the two front golem away, but they took the hits, and one moving up to occupy the space Cumdar had vacated, making room for a third golem to step forward, and the fire exploded against the new golem, stronger than Tibs expected, and his essence, while only deflected part of the heat. He ignored the pain it caused before he absorbed it in favor of turning and running after Cumdar. He felt a sword add another cut in his armor. Then they were up and following Mez through the doorway. "We need to better manage our essence," Jekyll said, seated against the opposing wall once Tibs had disrupted the trigger and the doorway became stone again. "What you need," Don snapped, "is to stop throwing yourself into fights, or going into a room before I check them for traps," Tibs added, hands on knees, suffusing himself with purity, but not getting the usual quick restoration. "As we are close to the dungeon exit and the cleric station there," Cumdar said, "it might be wise to head that way and avail ourselves of the service. We can discuss all the things we should have done with a tankard in hands and a meal before us." "Best idea," Jekyll replied, pushing himself to his feet, then starting to topple forward, only to be caught by Mez, who barely looked able to stand himself. "I might need help to make it to the exit." "I think he might have left some of his mind behind," Don mused, getting under Jekyll's other arm. That is what our leader wishes you to believe," the cleric said. "Jekyll still has all the mind he began this run with." "Stop revealing my secrets," the fighter grumbled. Don sighed. "That's what I was afraid of." And this concludes chapter 83 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe, hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is up for free on Royal Road along with the other books. And if you want to read ahead of Royal Road and support me in the process, that is on my Patreon. The links are in the note. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.